Hi everyone, so I'm here in Tallin, Estonia at Mindvalley University 2018. And this is a really remarkable experiment that we're doing in creating a moving city campus. There are 1,000 people here from some 40 to 50 different countries. And the unique thing about this university is you attend with your kids. So my 10-year-old is in classes in the same building as me, where I'm learning from legendary speakers like Nassim Haramein and Shafali Sabari and Sri Ravi Shankar. And my 10-year-old is learning from people like Jim Kwik and other extraordinary teachers. So we wanted to create a new type of model of learning that is transgenerational. Who says you can't go to school with your kids, right? And to run the kids program in Mindvalley University, we had to bring one of the most remarkable women I've ever met when it comes to teaching parents how to raise extraordinary children. She's our guest today, and this whole conversation is going to be about her ideas on parenting. Now, she's not a surprise to you because this is the second time I'm bringing her onto this program. The very first time I brought on Ria Lala was around 2.5 years ago. Back then, we were just starting out. We didn't have a fancy film set, so I was interviewing Ria on Skype. If you look at that old video, it's literally a Skype interview. And in that Skype interview, and you can still find it in the program, Ria goes through 6 models of parenting. She disrupts 6 different bullshit rules of how we've been trained to parent our child and gives us 6 new frameworks for parenting. I remember to this day walking out of that Skype interview, even though it was 2.5 years ago, going to my son. It was now at this point time for me to tuck him into bed, and I was a different person. In 60 minutes, Ria transformed me as a parent because I'd unconsciously bought into some of the old rules of parenting. And what Ria shared was a whole new way of looking at the topic. So if you're a parent, if you're an educator, if you work with kids in any way, this conversation, round 2 of bringing Ria's wisdom to our tribe is really going to intrigue you. Now I want to tell you a little bit about Ria. Not only is she running the kids program here at Mindvalley U, precisely because we have so much respect for a genius, but Ria is the founder and CEO of buildgreatminds.com, where she supports parents to take them back to their intuition, to uncover unconscious patterns, narratives, and blind spots and biases that parents has. She has led global seminars and workshops for 20 years on the intricacies of emotional intelligence to Fortune 500 companies, to Children's Aid, to the UN, as well as public and private schooling systems. And through coaching workshops and courses, she has been inspiring extraordinary parents to raise and elevate their consciousness and transform alongside their kids so that the parents too become deeply aware, emotionally connected, and fully expressed to their children the loves of their lives. So please give a big round of applause and a big welcome to Ria Lala. Firstly, we're so honored and blessed to have you leading our kids.
I'm excited to be here. I'm excited to be with the kids. They're learning amazing stuff right now.
And it's a 30-day program, so I know that being with a group of kids, with some 70 children for 30 days is no easy task, right?
No, it had initial challenges, but you know what's amazing is how these ideas that we had to bumble our way through in our 30s, 40s, 50s, how it can be distilled down to kids that are as young as 6 in some cases, but really for 9, 10, 11s, having conversations, having introspections and reflections and epiphanies that we had to wait till we were in a fight with a spouse or a friend to figure out how do we navigate those waters. So it's beautiful.
So I'll share a story that I just heard, and there's a lesson in the story as well. So there was a parent here who told me in week 2 of Mindvalley University, I brought my kid, I put my kid in Ria's program, and after day 1 and day 2 and day 3, my kid came to me and I asked him, what are you learning? And he goes, absolutely nothing, Mom, I don't know what I'm learning. And then she said that very same night, she did something that triggered her child, and the child reacted in a completely different way. Rather than go, Mom, you make me mad, he went, Mom, I feel upset when you take that action. And the mom was completely shocked.
Right. That's amazing. Yeah.
And the mom said, kid, you're telling me you learned nothing? So it was really cool to see how these kids unconsciously were being transformed, even in their dialogue with their parents.
Absolutely. You know, that comes out a lot in the recap the next day. But when you hear parents, so I had a different experience. I had a parent come up and say to me that my child called me out on a power struggle we were happening. How did you know we were in a power struggle? Well, I wanted to be right and you wanted to be right. So there's a power struggle. So what do I do now in this moment for us to try and turn it around?
So the kid called the parent out.
Yes, for being in.
How old was this child?
The child was 10.
That's incredible.
Yeah. And I've also heard where one gentleman came, he's from Italy, and he said to me, I don't know what you're doing, I don't know if you're mystical or what, but I've never ever had my child. Now this isn't school, right? This is an educational experience, right? Workshops. However, he goes, my child has never ever wanted to go to school, and yet every day he wants to show up. So it is very beautiful to see how the kids express themselves, how the kids create their boundaries in that situation, how the kids become more aware of how to coping strategies, self-aware, taking perspectives. This is the fundamental of what allows us to have a rich life. Us as a human, it's not I think, therefore I am. It's I feel, therefore I am, right? A human being is a human feeling. So if we can help children navigate the very complex world of feelings, then you start having magic happen. Then you start transforming an entire generation of. And
this is why emotional intelligence is such a big focus of yours.
Yes. Yes.
So let's get on with some of the questions, okay, for today. So I want you guys to take notes, because if you remember Rhea's initial interview on consciousness engineering, she went through 6 different models of realities, around 10 minutes each. There was so much to write down, but like I said, it was a transformative experience. So the first question for you, Rhea, is what would the education of the future look like when it comes to our kids?
So of course that's an interesting question, and the answer back to that is, well, how distant into the future, right? Are we talking about now, right now?
Well, if you could wave a magic wand and shift how we're educating our children, what would be one of the shifts?
Absolutely, we would have to bring emotional intelligence into the classroom very early, but it's more than just teaching kids EQ. So EQ as in self-regulation, self-awareness, perspective taking, because the people that are around the children, so the teachers who have their own unconscious biases and beliefs and value systems, who get triggered by different things, if they haven't transformed and become aware of whatever that is that's going on inside of them, they will unconsciously push that onto the children, and then now all of a sudden you're now thwarting their own learning. So really, we have to now carefully curate who is leading the children, from the school system if they happen to be in a school, to the parent if they happen to be homeschooled, to the teacher who's actually in front of them. Because until that happens, until everyone is evolving and be building their own self-awareness, then you will have kids that are, they might learn a few tools and they might have a few skills in their pocket, but they won't actually make the transformation that needs to happen. So everything is predicated on the teachers and the people who are running the schools and the parents growing and learning at the exact same time.
So it's about training the child, but also training the parent and training the teacher.
Correct.
And I'm so glad you said that. The new Mindvalley for Schools model that we are launching next year does precisely that. It's not just education for the child, we educate the parent and the teacher as well. Now, one of the things that you talk about, which is a really interesting technique, is the concept of the footnote. Let's talk about that.
Right. So I believe that parenting is a continuous footnoting of moments. So there will be an immense amount of situations where you're triggered by your child, or your child is doing something that you don't like. And so in that moment, you'll want to dive in with a solution or a fix or a response. And what I'm saying is resist the urge in that moment to try and fix it or teach. And I would say 99.9% of the times, the teachable moment is one that comes at a time when their mind is hospitable or receptive to what you have to say. And when a child has a strong belief, or a child is wanting to feel their esteem, a high sense of esteem, in that moment, you trying to teach them is not going in the actual flow of the child. So resist the urge, but then you have to footnote it because you have to address it at a later date. And so the conversation could go something like this. You footnote the moment, and then you wait for that moment where you're feeling really close and connected to your child. Maybe it's right before bed. And then you say, hey, I noticed today that you got really angry when your friend said that. hey, I was just wondering, what could you do in that moment instead? And maybe they say something crazy. Maybe at that moment they go, well, I could have hit him. And then you go, hey, that's an option. What else you got? And you keep going. So what you're doing is you're brainstorming now and co-creating with your child. But let your child go first, because when you do that, and then you ask your child, out of all the options you just came up with, if you had to pick which one you think is going to be the best option, I can tell you, I haven't met a kid alive that goes, well, let's just go with the punch in the face.
So that's an interesting technique. Now, the first thing you're saying is, if your child does something which is off, you don't bring it up instantly. You footnote it and you bring it up later when you're in a more peaceful moment with the child.
That's right. When the child is not in their own amygdala hijack, when they're not being run by their own anger or big feelings. So you have to gauge that. You have to use your intuition as a parent. First of all, you want to preserve the integrity and dignity and esteem of the child. You don't want to embarrass them in front of their friends. But you also want to find the moment where the child is actually going to listen to what you have to say. So forgo the need to fix it now. Forgo the need to look good in front of all the other parents. I need to train my child right now so the other parents think I'm doing a good job. Forgo that need and wait. And that's what I mean by preserving the dignity of the child.
I see, but then now I also get that this footnoting technique we were talking earlier can be used for anything else, including relationships with your spouse.
Oh, absolutely. My entire life is footnoting with my husband. And believe me, when I don't footnote, I always get it wrong.
Right. So run us through that. How does footnoting with your spouse happen?
So footnoting with my spouse is I see my husband do something that I find annoying or frustrating. And I know that I could bring it up right now. Yeah. Now, by the way, sometimes I totally miss the mark. Right. I'm still evolving myself. But I know I could bring it up now, but because he's attached to his response, and he felt in that moment that's his response, he doesn't want to be disciplined or advised in that moment. So in that moment, I'm going to let him have it. And then I'm going to wait till we're all in cuddly land, where we're feeling close and connected. And I said, hey, earlier on this day, and I bring that moment up and I go, was there a different way, or this is how I felt? And then all of a sudden, he actually wants to show up now as the hero. Right. His mind is so receptive. He wants to show up as the hero to say, oh, tell me, teach me, what else can I do?
Wow.
And then now I've got a guy who's like wanting to really make a shift.
There's no defensive-ness, there's no anger, because you're not approaching them during that, as you said, that amygdala hijack.
Yes.
And the amygdala being the part of the brain that
the reptile brain.
Right, the reptilian part of the brain that is triggered by fears and anxieties and things like that. But there's a second part to it. You were saying that as part of the footnote, when you bring it up with your child, it seems like what you were saying is you don't tell your child what to do. You ask them what they would do.
Well, I want to raise, and I think parents want to raise, ideally, kids that are not spoon-fed. They want to be intrinsically motivated and be able to dig deep. So if I spoon-feed them the answer, I'm going to rob my child of being able to brainstorm it themselves, which is one of the reasons why I never tell my child to say sorry to anybody. I don't ever want them to say, no, never. Because for me...
Well, are you saying that saying sorry to someone is bad? Or are you saying you simply don't ask your child to say sorry?
Well, both, actually. Sorry, I feel that we've evolved past the sorry, and I'm going to speak to that in just a second. So telling my child to say sorry often comes from the parent's own ego. And it robs the child in that moment of a chance to really deeply reflect. So I'm going to give you a personal situation. When my son was 4, maybe going on 5, he was really angry at his sister, and he said, I'm so mad at Sky, I hope she gets hit by a bus. Now, that was very shocking in that moment, because he had never said anything like that before. So I could have reacted and said, that's not nice to say, we shouldn't say things like this. Do you really believe that? But in that moment, I forgoed the need to try and teach him anything, because in that moment, he's angry. So what does he need to feel in that moment? What he needs to feel is his anger is validated and affirmed. I see you. I'm in the trenches with you. I get your pain. So when the child feels safe, like he's not being judged and there's no make, wrong, blame, or shame, then the child now begins to calm down and starts to soothe themselves. And in that moment, or you're actually co-regulating in that moment, then the child now, through his own vices, gets the opportunity to reflect and say, which is exactly what happened, which is now he's calm, he's not feeling like he did anything that was shameful, which means he's a bad person. Then he says, I actually don't think that I want Sky to get hit by a bus. And then he goes on his own and he said...
He just said that by himself.
He said that by himself.
Right.
And that's simply by asking, not even a leading question, because I could also be a lawyer and try and lead him towards a response. but I want to stay neutral because I want him, and then I can feel good as a
So
parent.
are you being
that it's
non-reactive
intrinsic.
in that situation?
That is always like at the root of it. I like to see parenting.
But if you're being non-reactive, but it has jarred you for him to say
Correct.
something that violent,
Exactly.
won't he detect that?
Yes, exactly, which is why I believe that the analogy I like to use is imagine yourself as a spinning planet,
Right.
okay? And your planet is spinning, and this is the parent. And your child is always going to be in your orbit. And they can sense and they can feel into and they can intuit into everything because they have like spider sense.
Right.
So in that moment, your job always is, in that moment where I feel jarred and I feel dysregulated, the work is always with me. The work is to make sure that my planet, and I'm using all the coping strategies that I've learned along the way, to make sure my planet spin is the most beautiful, calming spin that can be created. So as my child now in their wild spin enters into my orbit, now all of a sudden I'm influencing his orbit. But if in any way I'm dysregulated or getting caught up in the drama of what's happened, he can't find a shoe, so I gotta help him find a shoe, and what's gonna happen if he doesn't find a shoe, then his spin is going to start going like this. So the work is always here.
Wow, that's a really beautiful way of putting it. Now, how would parents and educational institutions use this concept of footnote? Can it be done in the classroom? Can it be done by a school?
Absolutely. So in that situation, the teachers would be supported on recognizing in a very left-brained world and wanting to fix and solve, to take a moment and reflect and take perspective. What is the experience of the child right now? Maybe the child wants to be right. Maybe the child wants to be validated. Maybe the child wants to look cool in front of its friends. Maybe they don't want to be reprimanded. I don't want to. I mean, I don't want anybody to tell me what to do and how to do it. The child feels the exact same way, but they will have your listening and they will have open ears when you find the right timing, but they feel safe and they feel understood and they feel like they're not in front of anyone for anyone to judge them, and then you get reverential listening. And then you can guide them in that space. So if you can support the teachers and how to do that. But that brings up another interesting thing, and that is if the teacher has never experienced that in their own lives, and this is something that I've just garnered from years of coaching and years of coaching parents as well. They don't do this because they're drumming their fingers, but they go, I didn't get it, therefore you're not gonna get it. This is a very unconscious behavior that happens with parents. So for example, if a father didn't get enough hugs from his own dad, let's say, and then all of a sudden he has kids and he goes, okay, well, I'm gonna hug my child because my dad didn't hug me. So yes, let's assume that we're always doing incrementally better than our parents. Right. That's the way it's supposed to be. However, there is a moment where the child now is practically living in your armpit. So secretly, the parent might be going, this child's so needy. They always want to be around me. How come they don't just kind of go and have their own interests? And so what's happening in that moment is their own 5-year-old, their own 8-year-old is saying, but nobody hugged me. Nobody went and tended to every little boo-boo and every little pain. And so now they're going to be in an immense amount of frustration and a toggle on how do I give it to you when my own 5 or 8-year-old hasn't been healed yet. So that's the work. That's the work. Go and heal. Go and find your 5-year-old. Go and find your 8 and 12-year-old. Figure out all the pains that never got healed and get to work with that, because then it doesn't show up in your parenting.
So are you saying that all parents are somehow unconsciously bringing in our issues from childhood to our children?
Always. Always that's happening.
That's funny. I wonder what mine are.
Yeah. Well,
and how would you find out?
So, well, this is now how you create a feedback culture. So this is where you take your ego and you throw it out, and this is where you become ruthless in how much you want to grow. So how do you grow? Yes, you could ask the people that are closest to you, which are your children, your spouse, then your friends and your family. They will always probably give you the most honest answers. And then, but you have to create a safe space for that. So the safe space is, I really want to work on myself. I know I'm doing things as a husband or as a father or as a friend, and I want you to know the only way I can up my game is if you are willing to give me some feedback. And I know you might feel uncomfortable to give it to me because you feel you're going to hurt my feelings or you feel it's going to cause me pain, but I fetishize it. In fact, fetishize it. Make it your fetish, and then you're going to get feedback. Now, you can choose at that moment what you want to take in, and you can choose at what pace you want that information. But then you can also say, okay, I'm going to leave it loose. I'm going to keep it there as an invitation and for my own mind to take in when I'm ready. And then you get busy doing the work to go, okay, I can either go there full of it, or I can go, maybe, just maybe, there's something that's in my blind spot. I mean, how else do you see your blind spots? They're in your unconscious.
Right. Now,
the only way is to ask.
Now, one of the things that you've been espousing that parents do is to get feedback from their kids.
Yes.
Walk us through that process. How do we do that?
So the way I like to encourage parents to do it is find that perfect intersection of calm and connection. For me, it's usually right before bed, and then I ask the child, this is how you get feedback, ask the child, tell me how you felt loved by mommy today. Tell me how I can love you in a way you want to be loved. Tell me if there's anything that I might be doing that triggered you today. So you can phrase it however you want. I also, though, recommend that parents ask, how did you feel loved by mommy or daddy? And also what they need to work on. Why? Because you don't want to walk out of the room with your shoulders slumped. Right. You don't want to have 10 things, well, you use a tone with me, and you yell at, you want to have something where the child also reflects. But, it's really interesting. You could take your children to Disneyland, like the ultimate place, and all day you spent with them, went on every ride, gave them a great meal, but when you asked them, when did you feel loved by mommy? Well, when you were getting out of the car, you put your hand on my shoulder. That was the moment of connection. That was the moment of presence where the love landed. So your job now becomes, I want to know where love lands. I want to put on my curious detective hat and be ruthless in trying to figure out where my love lands. Because who cares about loving someone if the love's not landing?
Now is that going back to like the 5 languages of love? Have you heard of that?
Yeah, I've heard of the 5 love languages, and that's great to know, the 5 love languages. But, kids often, and whether you've read or not, don't compartmentalize it so perfectly. So there might be slight nuances and subtleties to how they want their love. For example, I've asked my daughter, do you like it when I kiss you like this? No, it leaves too much wet, soggy stuff in my face. And then I have to work through my own ego and defensiveness. Right. Oh, you don't like that kiss? But I thought that was a good kiss, right? So now you're actually getting granular with the way the love lands. And if you get granular, I like it when Hayden Hayden tells you, I like it when you do this, but not this, and like this. Now you are carefully crafting for Hayden.
Wow.
His own unique love language.
But how would you get a child to open up to a parent like that? Because many children are going to feel, they're not going to feel safe telling their parents what they feel the parent is doing right and what the parent's doing wrong.
So this is now about storytelling, and this is now about sharing. So we often are so eager to find out, how was your day? Tell me about your day, you.
Right.
I think you should share twice as much as you ask. I love giving my kids every drama-filled, insecure, nervous, don't know if anyone's going to show up to my event type story. And in that place, and I use the emotional language, I felt nervous. And then they start to feel calm and connected to their own nerves or insecurities. Because I go, I'm not some weirdo for feeling this.
Wow. So that is so counterintuitive. So you're saying parents should be vulnerable with their kids, confess their insecurities.
Everything.
And this is a good thing.
Yes. They should share everything that they're trying to keep in the dark with their kids. And shine light on it. And the child will get a very robust, deep introspection to someone else's feelings and world. And it's just a conversation. And the beauty of it is you can show them how you work through it, how you navigate it, how you went from, I don't know, to here, where I know.
But here's why it seems counterintuitive, right? So let's say you work in a company where there is an abusive culture, your boss is an asshole, your coworkers are backstabbing, and you come back and you're telling your child about what happened at work and how you're feeling awful and how you feel that your coworker is politicking behind your back. Isn't that going to warp your child's belief system about what it means to be an adult, what it means to have a job? Aren't you imposing these ideas in his head that when he grows up, he just simply expects that 9 to 5 is going to be sucky?
Right. So one of the things we want to do is when I'm exposing my kids to these things, I'm generally exposing them to, I'm okay with the tenuous, like not having the exact answer. Like as I'm working through my nerves, let's say on something, I can walk them through, but I don't want my child to ever feel, first of all, responsible to caregive me. That is not the natural hierarchy. So I don't want it to be like, I'm coming to you with my complaints and I don't know what to do. That's a very important piece because this is not like complaint land. This is now, I'm sharing something, and generally I have an idea, or I have a few ideas of how I'm going to work through it. Now we're in solution mode. You got any ideas?
Right.
And now
I see
it's
what
a
you're
co-creation.
saying. I see what you're saying. So that's the nuance. It's co-creation.
Yes.
This is how I'm feeling. What's your advice?
And have you ever felt like that? Because when you go,
Right.
oh yeah, I had to do a presentation in front of my whole school and I felt really nervous. I didn't know if anybody would like me. Oh,
Wow.
yeah. And so what can we do? What can we
You're
do
right,
together?
You're right. And that's so interesting because I realized I've been doing this wrong in a way. Because I've been picking up my son from your classes.
Yes.
And on the drive home back, I'll ask him, so what did you learn today? And he'll always give a one-word response, right? Emotions. But I realized I'm not telling him what I learned. I'm not telling him about my breakthrough today.
Yeah. And not just the breakthrough, the breakdown.
Right.
The breakdown. Today, I went and I interviewed and I forgot all the questions I was supposed to ask and I didn't know what to say and I started to feel like an idiot. How about that? Or I started to feel like I didn't know what I was talking about. Or I felt like I didn't know if I really connected with this person. And how did you feel? When you went to class today, did you feel connected to somebody? Did you struggle to connect?
Right.
And then you might have a conversation that leads to authenticity and to feelings.
Wow.
Right?
That's a really powerful technique.
Yeah, it is.
So I want to go back to something you said earlier, right? That aroused my curiosity. You said you never get your kids to say, I'm sorry.
Yes.
So can we go there a little bit further? This morning,
Yes.
my 10-year-old son, he made a snide remark to my 4-year-old daughter that made her cry. Basically, she was watching something on TV and she was watching something about ballerinas and she said, ballet is so hard. And then he replied, no, it's easy. You just don't know how to do anything.
Yes.
And then tears welled up in her eye and she just started bawling her eyes out,
Yeah.
right? And so now he wasn't angry, he wasn't upset. He was
Right.
just, being a 10-year-old boy.
Right.
I asked him to apologize to his sister.
Yeah.
And then he apologized, then they hugged, and then they cuddled, and then they were fine again. But you're saying I shouldn't be telling him to say I'm sorry.
Well, I don't like to use the words should or shouldn't. I like to
Okay.
use as useful or not useful.
Okay.
And so, is it useful? So let's think. What do we really want your son in that moment to do?
Well, I wanted him to feel sympathy for his sister, but I wanted him to also learn that maybe he doesn't have to be such a frickin' smartass.
Sure. Okay, so basically you wanted him to reflect.
Right.
And then maybe choose something that was more useful or
Yes.
conducive to peace and tranquility in the household.
Right.
Right. So if that's what you're optimizing for, then can you forgo the need in that moment to force the I'm sorry, which now he's going, I want daddy to like me. I don't want anyone to be mad at me, so I'm going to say the I'm sorry. But I don't trust. I feel the self-reflection is untrustable in that moment. Because there hasn't been enough of a moment to sit with it and internalize it. There's no perspective taking yet. So we could try and spoon feed it for them and go, that hurts your sister. You can see that she's crying. We don't want her to
Right.
cry, do we? And then you're going to scratch the surface at it, but you're going very superficial. But I want a deeper learning. And you do too.
Right.
And that deeper learning, you could say on the car ride over, so she's crying. And go, Hayden, I can see that your sister's crying, but you know what? This is something that I think we can talk about. We can talk about later. And then you can footnote. I mean, that might be
Right.
the car ride over now. So in the car ride over, you can say, Hayden, what do you actually believe? Like, what do you think about ballerina dancing? I don't know. Maybe this is an opportunity
Right.
because he has minimized how difficult ballerina dancing is. Have you ever tried it? So now you have a curious engagement where the child is not feeling like, I'm going to teach you
But
that.
in this case, him saying sorry stopped her crying.
So that's another thing. So she probably feels that that's how we've been socialized towards the healing is done. She's been socialized, but
Right.
really and truthfully, if we could get into her 4-year-old mind and she was to actually be reflecting, is she feeling like her brother actually
Right.
respects and admires ballerinas? No. In that moment, she just knows in the context of this culture, you say sorry and now you're supposed to feel good. So she stopped the
You're
crying.
right. She's been socialized to accept the sorry.
Yeah. And it's like that fixes everything. But it really hasn't, because Hayden isn't none the wiser. Hayden doesn't have a different worldview about ballerina dancing. And now we can invite him into a different discussion and through curious, engaged questions, help expand his view. Maybe he needs to, later on in the
expand
teachable
his
moment, daughter, would you like to teach
Right.
the whole family some ballerina dancing?
Right. I
And
see what you mean.
by the 5th minute,
I
he's
see
tired.
what you mean. I fixed the crying, but I didn't solve the deeper problem, which
Yes.
is where he lacks respect for his sister's interest.
Yes, lacks respect for his sister's interest.
Or minimizes.
But to be fair, he might actually believe that.
Right.
Is he wrong for actually believing that ballerina dancing is what it is? That, from his worldview, is his truth right now.
Right.
What is our goal now? To say, no, it's not? Or to expand, lovingly, supportively, expand his truth? And then he comes to his own epiphany. And then that's the building.
I
the
get
range.
what you're saying,
Yeah.
man. I have so much more to learn on parenting.
Yeah.
So one of the things you say is that the idea that kids should respect their parents is wrong. Let's talk about this. Kids shouldn't respect their parents?
I believe that the respect is always earned. Yeah? So we have a respect for somebody new. I mean, we don't just walk down the street and just bump into people and slap them in the face. We don't do that, right? We know that's not culturally accepted. But respect it's earned after you've had a chance to get to know somebody, after you see how you're treated and feel in the context of them, correct? Then the respect increases. Agreed?
Right.
So with children, does the child also have an experience of you? Is it just because you birthed the child, therefore it demands respect? Now, that doesn't mean that I have my children running around, but I believe that for the child to respect, they have to see that modeled. They have to see a parent who is curiously engaged and wanting to be present and connect with them, and then the respect emerges. It emerges naturally. You don't have to force it. You don't have to say, you must respect me.
Right.
It happens naturally. You know, when parents say to me, my child won't listen, they're not listening. In fact, half the issues they feel in their life would be shifted over listening. You know, listening is a function of rapport. If anytime a parent tells me that my child doesn't listen, I know the way to fix that is you build the rapport. Rapport builds the listening, which builds the respect.
Wow. So I see how it all connects to what you said earlier.
Yeah.
Okay, so here's another question. This is very common with our audience, and it's a question we've got a lot.
Yeah.
How do you distribute responsibility between parents, especially when one has a job and the other is spending more time at home with the child? How can both parents become equally important in the life of a child?
Yeah, so I did an event, and this is a real shift that's happening with JP Morgan, and they asked for 6,000 of their employees to be trained on conscious parenting. It was amazing. And the number one question that emerged was, busy parents that are working in like one of the biggest banks in the world, how do I show up for my child in a way that's meaningful? And here's the thing. It is not about giving your child 100% of your attention. I could have a parent that is home all day with the child, but the child doesn't feel seen or heard or connected to. So now this is a function of, in a busy world where at least one parent, possibly two, are out of the home, how do you take that moment, whether it's 10 minutes, and make sure that you create presence? And you can't fake it. Kids might, I mean, if you're trying to play Monopoly with your son, but meanwhile you're thinking about the interview that you have to do, right? It's better you say, I don't want to play Monopoly. It's better you figure out if I only have 10 minutes, what can I create in that 10 minutes where I have the child's experience of me is where the world has stopped spinning and now the orbit is only just with you. Could you create that?
Right.
That's 10 minutes. And that 10 minutes is enough to have that child feeling full. And
so you're saying it's not about the length of time, it's about the quality of time.
It's the quality of time. Because I think that there are many parents that spend an immense amount of time with their children.
Right.
But the child doesn't have the experience of feeling deeply connected, deeply seen and understood, where the parent is sharing and asking questions and then going down the rabbit hole of discovery and understanding.
Very, very, very interesting concept. For those of you watching, if you wanted to go deeper in that particular concept and hear it from the perspective of another parent, a famous parent, listen to my conversation with Ivan Meissner on work-life balance. It's part of the same program, Consciousness Engineering. And Ivan is the guy who started BNI International, one of the world's largest networking groups. And he talks about the importance of balancing work and life. And he touches on parenting in a really remarkable way. And his ideas kind of resonate with what Ria is saying.
One other thing I would add to that is whenever you ritualize something, it stands out in someone's mind. So, for example, if you took your kids to Estonia, then you can go, do you remember that time we went to Estonia? It's something very different. So if you can ritualize things, then you can, in the sea of a million life experiences, that ritual becomes embedded. So for example, if you grew up choosing a pumpkin for Halloween, and every year you went to go and choose a pumpkin, you'll always remember, I always used to go with my mom and dad, and we'd go out to the pumpkin patch and we'd choose a pumpkin, we'd bring it home. When you do that, in all the wonderful things that we do for our kids and send them to all these different programs, that is how your children, you can solidify your presence and your contribution in your kids' consciousness. So finding opportunities to ritualize the experience. So what might that be? Well, I don't know. If your son is into, I don't know, whittling sticks and making daggers, then maybe that's something that you have as a consistent thing that you do. Because what are you really wanting for the child? I want to know that my child doesn't think I'm some chump. It just kind of shows up. You want them to feel that they feel connected to me just as much as mom, that they feel that I'm adding a contribution, that we have an experience, and sometimes that goes beyond words. Sometimes that's in a whittling of a stick together, but that time they know that you are 100% theirs.
Amazing. Next question, Ria. I understand that you teach that there are certain questions that parents can ask themselves to show up as better parents. What are some of these questions?
So some of them I've shared about, what can I do to love you better? How do you like to be loved? One of the questions that you can ask is asked at a particular time, and that is, whenever you see a behavior in your child that triggers you, you ask, what is it about me that created that?
What is it about me that created that?
So that changes the whole game. That's all the million and one things that frustrate you and anger you. The minute you've been able to self-soothe enough to get that clarity of thought, what is it about me that created that? So I'm going to give you an example. Imagine if the kids aren't going to bed. So when daddy says it's time to go to bed, all kids have skated into their bedrooms, right? And then I'm saying, okay guys, time to go to bed, but everyone's kind of dilly-dallying, and then they're taking forever in the bathroom and they're just wanting something to drink. In that moment, I can go, these kids aren't listening, and why aren't they listening to me? And these kids had everything their way today, and now it's my time, and run a whole big story. Now, in that moment, everything is about me blaming the child, right? The child doesn't listen, the child is indulged, the child, nothing pleases them, and then they still want to get on my last nerve before bedtime. If I now take a moment to regulate my nervous system, and then I ask, what is it about me in my inability to create boundaries, perhaps, in my inability to powerfully express my needs and wants, is creating that, then you're going to get a window into all the crap that we do, right? But we don't want to ask that question because it's easier to blame the child.
You're right. It's so fascinating.
So ask that for everything.
You're making me feel painful because I'm thinking back examples from just this weekend where I should have been asking this question.
I think it's actually one of the most powerful questions to ask for every situation. Whenever you see yourself triggered, you can't do that when you're actually in the trigger. So you got to figure out how you calm yourself down.
That's a beautiful question.
But what is it about me that created that? And in fact, take that question and extrapolate it to your whole life.
Right, because it can apply to your spouse, it can apply to your parents, it can apply to everyone, right?
And if you're really ready to roll up your sleeves and do the work, that's the question to ask.
Right, and for those of you who are on this program, I recently interviewed Shafali Sabari, who's also a conscious parenting expert who was teaching here at Mindvalley University, and she speaks about something similar, the form and the formless, about the illusion of the form and how everything that's part of the form that triggers us is merely a way for us to grow. Right? And so if you want to go deeper on that topic, I recommend that you, following this interview, you go ahead and listen to the one with Shafali. That's such an incredible question. Now let's come to the next question, right, for you, which is, how do we turn around disagreements with our kids when we fundamentally disagree with something? So
many parents are going to feel, I think, a bit triggered with what I'm about to say.
Right.
So a disagreement happens generally when somebody wants to be right. Two people want to be right, right? Because how can you have a disagreement if only one of you want to be right? So I used a technique that I learned from my dad, and that is, when you notice that you're wanting to be right, so you're first recognizing I'm wanting to be right and I'm in a power struggle, then the way I don't ever get into a power struggle with my kids or disagreement is because I go, you're right. So let's just sit with that for a second. You're right. In that moment, I'm going to forgo the need to be right. If the child says it's blue, but I know it's red, or I believe it's red, and the child insists that it's blue, what is going to be the issue with me allowing the child to believe that it's blue? Let them have it. Let them have it, because we're still footnoting that for the teachable moment. The teachable moment is when now they are receptive. And then if you ever want to get them, that's when you're going to get them. But you're not getting them in a, sinister way. You're getting them because you want to expand their view, but allow them to have it.
Okay, so let's take a practical example.
Yeah.
I tell my son he has a 2-hour limit on using his iPad this Saturday, right?
Yeah.
I catch him, and it's now been 3 hours. He's lost track of the time. He's been on that iPad for 3 hours. And I tell him, Hayden, you've been on that iPad for 3 hours. And he goes, no, 2 hours, but I know it's 3 hours.
Yeah.
Now, I also know he's not being malicious. He's just forgotten to count or set the timer or whatever. What do I do in that scenario? Do I just let him be right and footnote it?
So I'm gonna possibly make you feel a bit uncomfortable here.
Okay.
What happened at the 2 hour and 1 minute mark?
Well, an agreement was broken.
Agreed,
right?
agreed. But at the 2 hour and 1 minute mark, did you know that he had gone past the 2 hours?
No.
Right. Okay. So we're asking kids who are not adults yet to monitor something that is their favorite thing to do now.
Right.
Okay. It's like I'm living for my 2 hours, and then asking them to self-regulate with that. So that's why we don't have adults at 10 and 11, right? So we don't send them off to war and make big decisions on life, right? This is something that I think might have some of the listeners and even the parent feel uncomfortable, but it's a reality that I have to face myself. So when we have our children on for the 2 hours and 1 minute, we have to acknowledge that there was a part of us that was busy in our own little world, possibly in our own gadgets, possibly doing our own thing, and we secretly liked the fact that they were babysat for 2 hours.
Oh, you just make me feel uncomfortable.
You're
right.
Liked it
I was busy in my own
until
gadget.
the 3 hour mark hit, and then we go, I don't like it. And I'm not a good parent right now because I've let my child be on for 3 minutes, and I don't like the fact that I'm feeling like a bad parent. So who's the issue? The issue's with you.
Right, I see what you mean.
But truthfully, for probably 2 hours and 59 minutes, you liked it. And that is a sucker punch for us parents to confront that truth. I liked the babysitter. I liked you got to keep yourself busy and didn't ask me for a drink or water or anything.
That's a phenomenal response. I love this conversation because I love it when I'm speaking to someone and I'm feeling so uncomfortable because I am learning as I go. And damn you, Ria.
I feel uncomfortable too. I mean, I have to deal with these realities as well.
Right, but it's right. It's like what Shefali said, right? Parenting is one of the greatest ways for us to grow and transform as human beings.
Yeah,
it's like the universe testing us.
It's true. It's the ultimate gym workout. You're bench pressing like 500 pounds.
For the soul, right? Yeah. So let's go on to the next group of questions, which is on kids and their emotions, because emotional intelligence is something you're so big on.
Yeah.
So the first question is, at what age do children learn the most about personal interactions, about their own emotions? Is there ever a point when they're too young?
No, because even pre-verbal, the child is constantly looking to the parent's cue. So if you have a baby in your hands and you make a face because they have a bit of a smelly diaper, and they've actually taken video footage of parents' responses because they smell a stinky diaper, and that instantaneous slowdown of the camera and then what changes in the baby's face, who is constantly looking to their parents for cues, they now are already starting to learn shame.
Wow.
They can't tell you, are you embarrassed by me? Do you find that I'm some smelly being?
Right.
They can't say that, but they've already depicted it by the parent's response. Right. So all those micro cues that we're giving out all the time, this is where we can be conscious and make sure that we've really collected ourselves and are aware of our own internal state upstream. We don't want to wait till we're stomping around. We want to catch that further up.
Right, so it's starting out as soon as a baby is born. Now the next question is, how can you as a parent help your kids step into their power and become fully expressed?
So in order to become fully expressed is to first recognize that you're having an emotion. Yeah? And the way a child recognizes they're having emotion, this is what it is to feel your feelings, right? To feel your feelings is to know that I have a feeling. So what is a feeling? A feeling is something that's psychosomatic. I can't crack open your head, Vishen, and go, right there in the corner is anger. It's cortisol levels, adrenaline levels, but for people that don't have a medical doctor to check their blood, to see if their cortisol levels are up, or check some sort of imaging to see where the blood has flowed to, What you can check is where the sensation is in your body, right? Now, here to me is really at the crux of teaching yourself self-regulation and helping your children navigate that space. And that is where you have a sensation in your body which wants to reveal all of its somatic intelligence, stay with it. Stay with it in a very disembodied world, in a world that has your head cut off from your body. Not actually.
Right.
And then stay with the uncomfortability for your 2-year-old self who felt jealous because one kid could do a roly-poly and you couldn't. But you couldn't express that they could do that you're feeling jealous. And in that moment, how do you re-embody it? Stay with the feeling till you can get to the epiphany or the jewel or the gem at the end of it. So that means don't go put a load of laundry in, don't go write a text, don't take a selfie, don't do any of those things, but be with the feeling. While everything in you is going, I don't want to feel it, I don't like this feeling, it doesn't feel good right now because I'm feeling.
Right.
And stay with it. That, if I had to give the ultimate tip to conscious parenting, it would be that. Because if ever you want to get a window into your unconscious, because how do you, getting back to an earlier question, how do you get a window into your unconscious to all of your 5-year-old, 8-year-old, 12-year-old paper cuts on your heart or wounds? That's the place. Stay with the feeling till the feeling reveals something to you. Now, I've done this myself. I've done my own empirical research with this, and I coach clients on how to do that. But then you can now create a relationship with who? More important than even your children, your own 5-year-old little boy, your own 8-year-old, and then you ask, and this is the ultimate, this is the money, this is the ninja question. What is it that you need right now? That's what you're asking your 8-year-old self as you stay with your feeling. Stay with the feeling, and then ask your little girl or your little boy, what is it that I want right now? What is it that I need right now? Just that exact question. And then get an image of your own 5-year-old, 8-year-old self, and whatever, if ever there's God that's going to speak to you, it's going to be through their mouth. And then whatever they say, that's what you do. I feel like you're always working so hard. I feel like I'm never good enough. And then you go, then this is the act of reparenting yourself. So Dr. Shefali gave this as a high level, but the nuts and bolts and the how-to is in here. The nuts and bolts says you ask your 5-year-old self, what do you need right now in order to feel safe? What do you need right now in order to feel loved? And guess who gets to show up and do it? You. Because mommy and daddy are not going to necessarily do it. You have to reparent yourself. You have to say you are worthy of taking a break and you're still lovable even though you haven't conquered the world yet, and it's okay, and I'm going to love you, and I'm going to love you as you bumble and stumble and thrash around, and you deserve that love and you're worth it. And then the child goes, you promise? Do you promise?
Right.
And then you do it.
Wow. So next question. What are the best ways I can help my kids deal with their emotions and resolve conflicts?
The best way to get your child to deal with emotions is create a culture in the household where there's nothing that's off limits, and express, yeah? So first have the child understand that they're having an emotion, allow the child the opportunity to express. Often the parent is quick to circumvent that by explaining, well, you shouldn't be angry because I gave you 2 hours on the iPad, right? In that moment, acknowledge, meet the child where they're at. I know you love the iPad, and you know what? I love actually being on my phone, right? And in that moment, the child feels understood and safe, and then you express your feelings about it, or I didn't like when my mom used to come in and tell me what to do, and then you can now allow the child to, first of all, feel, express, create boundaries. You can support them in ways to calm down, take a different perspective, and that's what allows a child to have a strong sense of self, feel deeply connected to themselves and deeply connected to others.
And another take on that question, right? What about sibling rivalry? Like, how do we work with that?
Right. So, this has me think. So kids are always asking, if you had to save one person, who would you save? Would it be me or your brother? First of all, I never say to my kids, I love you both the same.
Really?
No, because I don't. I love them, and I want them to see themselves as distinct and autonomous from each other. I love you for different reasons. You're both extraordinary, but for such different reasons.
Right.
And then that child gets a chance to be seen. Because if I go, I love you all the same, well, I don't want to be the same. I want to be different. Sibling rivalry is a competition for the parents' light to shine on them from their god and their goddess. So give them what they're actually wanting, that you're distinct and unique and extraordinary, and there's no one like you. Not even your brother. But still, who would you save?
So there's a technique that you teach. It's called the movie screen hack.
Yes.
Could you talk about this technique and how we can teach it to our kids?
So the movie screen hack is where, in those moments where you're at a loss for how do I handle the situation, and then I like this image where I imagine that everything that's unfolding right now is in front of a movie screen. And as I watch this movie screen with either myself or a character playing Rhea and characters playing my children or even my children, I go, what would that woman have to do? Where would she have to pull from? Maybe her baby toe, in order to show up in a way that it would have me clapping, going, oh, you are the heroine, for you to say and respond and behave like that, despite maybe the chaos that's happening around you. That creates a sense of distance from our own sense of self and our own triggers. Because now on a movie screen we go, but everyone's mistreated you, and everyone's wronged you, and the world has shunned you, and yet you've shown up like a hero. Where did that come from? So the movie screen hack creates some distance that allows you to have like a bird's eye view, or like, up on the movie screen, what would that person be doing? And when you ask that question, whatever they're doing, that's what you do. Whatever you be in the audience going, yes, do that. And then you can't go wrong.
So
it's a really powerful hack to create some separation, and then in the moment of indecision go, oh, this is probably the better move.
So in the final few moments we have, do you have any closing words of wisdom for the parents who are listening?
Probably the best offering I can give is, we spoke about the spinning planets, and we spoke about the little girl, yeah? And I would say that the most epic journey you're ever going to go on as a parent is actually a journey back to yourself, to find who you were at your own earliest sense of self, before the world came in and impinged and said who you should be and what you got to do. And if you can go back and figure out all those little paper cuts that exist, and the only way to ever do that is to figure out how you can actually be with your feelings and feel. We talk about feel your feelings all the time, but most people struggle with, well, how do I feel my feelings? And because you're feeling your feelings determines how well you can help your children feel yours, then do the work, because then you'll get things that will become clear, and that is, make no mistake, it is work, but that is the most heroic work that we can do as a parent. So feeling your feelings and being with your little girl and finding out what it is that will allow her to, or him, to heal and to expand and to grow and feel seen is the most epic journey I think we can do as a human.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Well, thank you so much for having me.
Take care, guys.